Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Planning and Development Control Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Omid Miri. I am the chair of the committee. Just to start with a few housekeeping points. The fire exit is towards the back in the lift lobby and down the stairs, and there are no fire alarm tests scheduled for tonight. And toilets are also at the back in the lift lobby. Moving on to item 1, apologies for absence, and there are no apologies for absence. Item 2, declaration of interests. I believe Councillor Harcourt has a declaration of interest. You'd like to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do. I'd like to declare an interest in items 5, 6 and 7, which are the issues relating to OPDC Planning Committee. As I've said previously at committee, I sit on the OPD's Planning Committee and therefore will not be participating in the discussion or the decision. However, I shall stay because I think it's important that I hear the arguments that Hammersmith and Fulham Planning Committee have to put to OPDC, which is where I will use those comments as part of the decision-making process in my own mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Are there any others? No, no others. Okay, so moving on to item 3, which are minutes of the meeting held on 18th of July 2023. Are the minutes agreed? Councillor Carmel?
One very small amendment, and I can't find it now, I'm looking for it, is on the Davenport Road section. It says for the following two, for the above, the application was approved for the above 2 reasons when there are actually 3 reasons mentioned.
Okay, yeah, if that can be amended, please. Everyone in agreement with that? Happy with that? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Any other comments? No? Okay, then we will move on to item 4, which is Cumberland Lodge. Can I please ask Neil Egerton to present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application relates to Cumberland Lodge, 21 Cumberland Crescent, and it's for a change of use, permanent change of use from residential dwelling to a bursar's office ancillary to St James's School. The St James's School site is shown highlighted in blue here, and Cumberland Lodge is indicated in red. Temporary planning permission was granted in 2017 for a 5-year period to allow the use of the house as a bursar's office in line with St James's School. The school had intended that development would have been carried out in the meantime to allow for the bursar's office to be incorporated within the school site. I think a combination of funding and the pandemic have caused delays to the school, so they've come back now for further permission for the site. We can't grant another temporary permission, so therefore looking for a permanent change. It's clear from the school's documentation and their submissions with the application that the intention is the bursar's office will be within the school site in the future, and when this site is no longer needed for that, then the site will be returned to a residential use. That would require further planning permission, as there's no automatic right of return, but that is obviously something that would be supported by officers. Just show this, the Cumberland Lodge is a building of merit, as indicated there, highlighted in green here, as is the school and adjacent rugby mansions. Just an aerial view of the premises there. And this is the current floor plan. The site allows for the bursar and 7 staff to operate in close proximity to the school, able to support the school and respond to any necessary actions. That's the view from Cumberland Crescent, just showing the building, and then that's the school adjacent to the site. Officers are supporting the application. There are conditions requiring that the use of the bursar's office be ancillary to St James's School to prevent any other school premises or anybody else looking to use that. If the school would say then no longer requires that, we would expect an application. We would support the change back to residential. We just draw your attention to the addendum, a couple of small matters relating to wording of condition 2, and just a couple of deletions within the report. We're deleting personal and replacing it with ancillary. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Neil. I believe we have one speaker in support of the application, so I'd like to invite Emma Penson to please address the committee. And Emma, you have 3 minutes whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. I act on behalf of St James School and would like to briefly summarise to you the background to this application and why it is important to St James School to secure planning permission this evening. In November 2017, Hammersmith and Fulham's Planning Committee granted planning permission for the temporary use of Cumberland Lodge by St James School as their school bursar's office for a 5-year period. Since this permission was granted, Cumberland Lodge has been used by the school's bursarial team, which has 8 staff members. Prior to the 2017 consent, the bursars team were located on the main Earsby Street site, but they did not have sufficient space, and the space they were using was needed to provide further accommodation for the school. It therefore became necessary for them to move off-site to free up space. The team provides vital day-to-day support for the school as a whole. They need to be readily available to all teaching staff who often require immediate face-to-face assistance. Ideally, their office would be within the main school setup, but as this is not currently possible, it needs to be located as close as possible to ensure that the school can continue to operate as a whole. Cumberland Lodge provides by far the best solution in this respect. The team also provides staff for emergency occurrences and emergency evacuations at the school. The school is located in a residential area, and therefore the school is very restricted in the alternative sites that it can use to provide the necessary accommodation proximate to their main site. Staff can easily walk between Cumberland Lodge and the main school site. The building will continue to be used as offices, and therefore the use is compatible with the surrounding residential uses and will not result in detrimental noise impact on neighbours. Pupils do not need to visit Cumberland Lodge. The school's long-term plan remains as it did in 2017, which is to extend the school to allow the bursars team to be reaccommodated on the main Earsby Street site. Plans and funding have not been advanced to the stage that was expected in 2017, and further time is required by the school to consider and progress their longer-term plans. Cumberland Lodge therefore continues to be the most suitable and available site to accommodate the team. For this reason, last November, we submitted a further application to seek permission for St James School to continue using the building as their bursar's office. As the officer has explained, there will be a condition attached to the consent confirming that the permission is personal to St James School, and once they vacate, it is expected that a further application will be submitted to revert the use of the property back to residential. We hope that the Planning Committee is able to support the proposal again this evening to enable St James School to continue using this building as their bursar's office. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we now move on to committee members' questions for officers. And who would like to start with the questions? No questions? Yes, Councillor Chabot-Verdier, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just one, if you could tell us more about the process with which this reverts to something used for housing. The speaker has said that there would be a planning application when the school decides to leave, but how do we make sure that that happens when they leave? Thank you.
Well, I mean, when the school no longer requires the site for its bursarial office, then they would put a planning application in just seeking to change the use back to a single family dwelling. That would be judged on its merits, but given that this would be returning the site back to its previous use. It's something officers would support. It'd be a residential use in the residential area. It should be a relatively simple process. I cannot imagine there'd be a lot of concern from the local residents at all.
Sorry, Chair, just if I understood your question correctly, I mean, any other use, if it wasn't being used ancillary and the school stopped using, someone else used it, then it'd be liable to enforce an action, and then that would potentially lead or force the hand of anyone who was using it unlawfully to seek residential or seek to regularize it on the merits that it's acceptable for them to use her as office. So it would be controllable by us.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, further comments? No? Okay, so we will now move on to voting. Firstly, we'll vote on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, which is on page 15 of the agenda. Councillor Chabot-Verdier, will you be voting for, against, or not voting?
For.
Councillor Harcourt?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
For.
Councillor Suslus? For. Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel?
For.
Councillor Pascu Toubourey? For. And I'll also be voting for. So recommendation 1 has been approved. And now we will vote on recommendation 2, which is also on page 15. Councillor Chabot-Verdier?
For.
Councillor Harcourt?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
For.
Councillor Suslus? For. Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel? Councillor Pascu Toubourey? For. And I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 5, which is, thank you, 3 School Road. And could I please ask the presenting officer, Yayan Bellis, to introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My colleagues working out the images. This is a consultation case from the OPDC on a site in Ealing. And the proposal is to redevelop it in the form of a 25-storey tower comprising replacement industrial and flexible working and E-class uses at ground, mezzanine and basement level with 167 flats above. I was thinking of impressions, but it's gone right on my head.
Chair. Just a comment really, rather than anything else. Something that's been really useful at this committee and elsewhere for that matter has been where the slide deck has actually been forwarded to members in prior to the committee, as indeed Mr. Edgerton did on the previous one. It's, you know, sometimes these are not always quite so visible, especially if one's eyesight's not so good. So being able to see it on laptop, which we all have now, is quite useful, and it also helps with situations like this. This isn't a criticism of anybody, but it's just something that's quite useful for the future. Oh, this
Yeah, that should have been sent, but just to
I've only got
make a reminder to
previous one.
officers to please send all the slides to committee members, but I believe this one has been sent to us.
Okay. I've got this. I didn't have this one. Okay, if we've got it.
Anyway, are we ready to begin Thank you.
This is going to test my eyes now. Okay, just for context, then North Acton Station is in the centre of that image on there. You can see LBHF and Ealing and about a boundary, which follows Old Dog Common Lane. Scrubs is the large green area with LBH and F on top of it. And the application site is the blue square. So in terms of as the crow flies distance, it's relatively close. Obviously, the road network is something different again. So it's a site that is currently occupied by two buildings, both two-storey with flat roofs, offices and industrial. The proposals to demolish those and to redevelop the site in the form of a 25-storey tower. It does replace industrial and employment uses at ground level, basement and mezzanine, more so in fact than they're on there at present. But the key element is the upper floors, which are providing 167 residential units. As I said before, it's not in our borough and we're not the determining authorities. So the concern we were looking for here is what impact, if any, would it have on the borough and the borough residents? And the key issue for us here is the actual scale of the building and potential views from particularly Wormwood Scrubs. It's in an area that the OPDC local plan now defines as appropriate for tall buildings. It defines tall buildings as 15 stories or more without giving another height, which is about 48 metres. This one, as I say, is 25 stories, 77 metres. And the image in the middle there is the mock-up of what it might look like viewed from the Scrubs. The image to the left, slightly misleading. That's the cluster that already exists around North Acton Station. And the one on the right, I think, is the Coal-Liddon one on it, which is further north and separate again. So that's more of a panoramic one with bits missing. The key one for us is the centre one. We acknowledge that it's the designated area for tall buildings. This is, however, the first one, or would be the first one. There are no other ones with permission, no other ones under construction. And the location of this particular one, is on the edge of the designated area. So the purple area you can see there is the designated area. And the blue square in the north is the location of the site. So our concern is that jumping in at 25 stories from the off in that location might mean you get much taller buildings than proposed as a sort of follow on from that. Our view is that it may be that 25 stories can be acceptable. They would need to be assessed in detail against the various local plans. In the meantime, though, whilst there's only this building there would be an impact on views from the Scrubs. We don't agree with the view assessment in the submitted application that these are minor. We think they're a sort of medium. And if we go back to that image, you know, as I say, it's of its time, I guess. You know, that is the situation at present, and that's what it would look like if it were built now. There will likely be further tall buildings in this area because the designation facilitates that. So at the moment, we can't sort of have regard to that. It's merely a policy direction and something that the OPDs are looking to facilitate, as indeed they are on Old Dog Station. And we haven't seen those yet either. But that is the basis of the concerns that we've expressed, is that at this point in time, it would have an impact that is more than minor. And that's given the location within the designated area, notwithstanding the designated area, maybe 25 stories is a tad high, and maybe a transition sort of height there, working up to the centre of the designated area, but might be more appropriate as sort of an edge condition, if you like. And that's why we're recommending that we raise objection on the height of the building, not on the design of it per se or the architectural quality, merely the scale of it and its impact on views from within the borough.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So now we'll move on to questions or comments from committee members. Yes, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is regarding the permit-free measures. This is being advertised as a development that would be permit-free. However, from looking at the CPZ maps of Ealing, it would appear that there is no CPZ map in this area. So my concern is that in the event of this construction, it would be misleading for a development to be advertised as permit-free when in reality there seems to be no possible way that that could be enforced on future residents.
Through the chair. Yes, I mean, it is badged as permit free. The background information available on the website there, including TfL comments, GLA comments, and comments from Ealing, acknowledge that they accept it as permit free. There are a number of requests that Ealing Council have made in respect of how that would be managed. There's a requirement, for example, that the various restrictions are incorporated in legal agreements. There are requests there also for contributions to the CPZs, and I'm assuming that would cover then road traffic order amendments, etc. So Ealing as a local planning authority and the GLA as the strategic authority are taking it as a car-free development, with the exception of blue badge spaces. And the measures that they've asked for, TfL and Ealing in particular, reflect what they would need to have in place in order to make that work.
Thanks. I should add as well, actually, the addendum, page 30, that officers have been copied into a late representation objecting to the proposed development that has been sent direct to the OPDC by the Old Oak Neighbourhood Forum.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on that, that is a letter that was sent direct to the OPDC as the determining authority, local planning authority in this case. The reason I've highlighted on here is we were copied into it, and it does. The origin of it is in fact this draft report before you that prompted the late objection to the OPDC, so ostensibly on the same grounds that we've highlighted here. There are a couple of other items in the letter too that don't reflect on what we're dealing with tonight, which go back to this organisation's involvement in the whole local plan process for the OPDC, and concerns they have that, you know, some of the decision making perhaps wasn't as transparent as it ought to be, and more importantly, that other decisions have yet to be taken, and indeed consultation on an SPD they referred to hasn't yet commenced. So the prematurity argument comes out there as well. But I put it on the addendum not because it's necessarily related to this, because we're not making the decision, just to advise members that that has been received and now by the OPDC as well, and will need to be taken into account in their assessment of the application, which is due on Thursday.
Thank you. And just to clarify, the Old Oak Neighbourhood Forum, as far as you know, is not a Hammersmith and Fulham based entity.
It is not. I couldn't say categorically that no resident of Hammersmith and Fulham is a member, but it is primarily an organisation based around RBKC.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Councillor Cummer.
Just a very simple one, given the size of the building, can you confirm that it's got twin stair cores?
But yes, I mean, it seems to have, it's got two stair cores. It's also got a separate fire lift as well, and a separate evacuation lift. So it seems to be in play, but what they've sought to do in the presentation is demonstrate to the OPDC that it meets the London plan requirements.
Okay. Councillor Pascu-Dubura, yep.
Thank you very much. This is a really interesting one because it seems to be quite a bit about precedent as well as the building in question. Given that it is to be assumed that there will be future applications for tall buildings in the area, is the point that we're trying to get across not the fact that tall buildings per se are a bad thing, but that this is too tall for that, and therefore that the massing of this 125-story building would be inappropriate because it creates precedents for all of the other ones to go up to 25 as well.
Through the chair, I think yes. In short, that is right. I mean, there are two elements to this. There is the acknowledgement that this area has been identified for tall buildings in the local plan. You know, obviously, Ealing are duty bound to determine in accordance with that in the London plan. I mean, we have to acknowledge that. The reality is that since that designation, nothing has happened here. There aren't any existing examples approved in the pipeline. There's no master plan per se. This is the first one. So there's that issue. You know, how long will it take for other buildings to come forward that might then form a cluster that might, you know, what in one way might be better, in another way might be more damaging. So that's the first issue. The second issue is, and related to that, an acceptance that although there is a designated area for tall buildings, it doesn't say 25 stories is appropriate. It mentions 15 as the starting point for tall buildings. Granted, it doesn't have a cap either. But it's located on the edge of that, where you might expect there to be a transition from the taller buildings in the center of a designated area to the areas around the designated area, which aren't themselves identified for tall buildings. So there's a question mark, I guess, there about whether 25 stories off the bat is the right approach, given its location, and whether maybe a transition or a sort of a stepping up approach might be adopted.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, that's for the OPDC to decide. I mean, we flagged it up here because it's our only opportunity to do so. And we do have to acknowledge that it is an area that they've identified for tall buildings.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And on point 6.5, one of the reasons that we disagree is that it would be a highly prominent new feature. But is it always the case that a highly prominent new feature is a negative thing?
But I think the issue with the view analysis that was submitted is that we don't necessarily agree with it. We think it has a more harmful effect than they've identified, but that's a matter of interpretation. The centered image there is what we'll see. I mean, that is clearly very different to what you see from the scrubs at the moment. There's no two ways about that. Now, whether members agree that's harmful or not, even for a temporary period, is another matter. But we're obliged to sort of flag up that that's the impact it will have. That impact will be either worsened or lessened as more buildings come forward, depending what they look like. Which is why we're kind of concerned that if you allow 25 stories from the start in an edge location, then you can only reasonably expect the ones more centralized and who follow on to be significantly taller. Now, obviously, the other side of that coin is that they would have to be justified in view analysis at that time, and we're not at that point. So, it's a potential kind of concern, should we say? But it would have to be dealt with anyway before any consent is granted.
Just to carry on from that with one final point in terms of the townscape visual impact assessment that was submitted. The applicant obviously talks about this being a beneficial impact. We don't agree with that, given as you can see in this viewpoint here, and therefore, the comments that we're making hopefully serve to reaffirm, if we did see future proposals, that future townscape visual impact assessment should conclude that isn't a beneficial impact. It is either a neutral to adverse impact overall in terms of this view.
Thank you. And obviously, this is a agenda item or application where we are not the deciding body. So, granted, that might be slightly different, but should we not, and are we not supposed to take each application individually? So without any sort of ideas of precedent and what other applications may or may not come in the future in mind, or is the officer's view that actually in this case we should not take this individually, we should think about potential future applications that might come up?
Through the chair, this is primarily in order to be able to discuss these things. Some of these things are concerns that we have that might then materialize as problems moving forward. It's to really advise the committee of those. We don't make a decision, so it's a different kind of area of responsibility. It's more about what we communicate to the OPC as our concern. And at this point in time, you're absolutely right. Each application is looked at on its merits. But the reality is, if you have already granted permission for a 25-story tower as the first one in a particular area, there is very little chance that anything that comes in the future is going to be that size or less. And therefore, potentially, with the proviso or the caveat that they'd have to be assessed by the OPDC and would no doubt be consulted as and when they come forward, there is a concern that it would be seen as a starting point for much bigger development. Now, whether or not that is bad, you know, in the way it pans out, we don't know because we haven't seen the designs, but that would be the logical consequence, it seems to me.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Harvey, yeah.
I just wanted to comment really, because it seems to me that you were saying that in the plans, they talk about 15 stories, but without a cap. So this building is going way beyond the 15 to 25. And as you rightly said, probably going to set a precedent. So we could have 30, 35 in the future. There's no limit, is there really?
There's a requirement for them to assess tall buildings against the criteria that are published in the London plan and against their own local plan, which identifies this area. It's a matter of fact that they don't have a cap. The way that's written at the moment is this is what a tall building is, at least 15 stories, 48 meters. It doesn't have a cap, so yes, there is an implication that anything bigger has to be assessed as well. But nevertheless, there is no sort of maximum there. So the likelihood is that further tall buildings here, if this is approved, will be taller still. But I couldn't hand on heart say that, you know, that they won't be designed in a way that, you know, we might find acceptable. We're not looking at it. At this point in time, all we can do is point out that, you know, there will be an impact on view from the scrubs. There is a potential impact on the heights of future buildings coming forward in this area, even allowing for the fact that it's identified in the OPDC local plan as appropriate for tall buildings. And given that they still have to make the assessment on the appropriateness, the suggestion is perhaps that settling initially for 25 stories here, that maybe there's a case to look at lowering that slightly because of its location on the edge of this area, without necessarily sort of, you know, scuppering the scheme, as it were.
So if I could just finish as well. So the impact on the scrubs is really ruining the view of what you can currently see, which is lots of open fields and not many buildings in the centre of that picture.
Well, it's a more significant impact than the applicants have set out to argue in their case to the OPDC, in our view. I mean, in terms of what it looks like that, you know, if you can imagine that building in the middle not being there, then that's the before and after. But, you know, that again, that's a matter of fact, and it's a matter of judgment as to whether we feel that it's significantly worse than they're saying. But the purpose of bringing it to committee is that can be discussed. I mean, it may be that members don't think that's such an issue because it is likely to be, you know, an interim position, although we've no idea how long that position will be. So lots of moving parts, and it's not straightforward. But you know, this is the position at this point in time.
Thank you. And I just want some clarification. So in this image that we're looking at now, the sort of stencils on the left are sites that have already been approved. Yeah.
They're not part of the same thing. The area, the left-hand side of the centre is the cluster of buildings that surround North Acton Station.
Yeah.
Which Alan is helpfully hovering over. And the one on the right is further north of the proposed Old Oak Station. So they're not immediately adjacent to each other, but you know, they would form part of a panoramic view if you're taking the whole lot in.
Yeah, sure. No, I just want to understand what exactly we're looking at. And then the one in the middle is the one that we're talking about now. And given that it's on the edge of the tall building zone, I mean, one way or another, we can expect from where that building is to the sort of edge of that little square, there will be tall buildings. Sorry, your mic.
Likely to be that they spread from that end, which is the northern end, all the way through. So you look effectively, they'll be getting closer to the North Acton cluster.
Yeah, but I think the point we tried to highlight that while there be tall buildings in all likelihood between the building you're seeing there superimposed in the middle, between that and the scrubs, by setting the first building at that height, those subsequent buildings that will actually be nearer to the scrubs will actually be in all likelihood taller than that.
Yeah, because that's on the edge and they can go up. Although the reason why I ask about the stencils is because they've already been approved. So I mean, there are already going to be tall buildings there. I know it's different to what we're talking about now, but yeah, okay. So thank you. Just wanted to make that point. Yes, Councillor Carmel.
Thank you. Yes. Can I first say that I agree entirely with Mr. Bellis's suggestion that it should be a more transitional building because of the taller buildings that are almost certain to follow. But I also have a great deal of sympathy with the objection that's been put in from the Ealing Civic Society, where they said, in effect, that residential development in this location is unsuitable as it's an industrial area with a lack of local infrastructure, poor amenities to support a residential community, and putting residential above proposed industrial uses is very likely to harm the amenities of future residents.
Okay. Was that just a comment? Yeah. Okay. Sure. Did officers want to? No. No
All I
answer.
would say is that I think the OPDC put up a fight to try and keep this designated industrial land as designated industrial land, and they lost that. So they're having to release it now to possibility of. So, you know, we are where we are, as it were, with that. And I'm sure that those arguments were, you know, put forward at the time, but they didn't gain traction with government, it seems.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from any committee members? Yes, Councillor Pascal-Duberry. Yeah.
Thank you very much. A quick one from me. Has any assessment been made of the, even if not under precise number, the order of magnitude of housing units that could be built were the local plan to be fully implemented? The total number of units that could be built were the OPDC local plan fully implemented?
Well, I can tell you what the current proposal is. It includes 167. Yeah, no, I don't have figures for the area. I mean, I think that there's a site designation on here which identifies a number. I think this is
176.
This is 176 on its own. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is a sort of designated site within there. I mean, the site's slightly larger, but this is part of it. And this itself has got 197 in it. I mean, it's a significant contribution, clearly, and you know, I'm sure that the height of the building also has to reflect the fact that they've desperately tried to re-provide the employment space, despite what the Ealing Civic Society are arguing against, and that is because they wanted to fast track the scheme with a London plan. So they're required, therefore, to come up with a particular plot ratio on the replacement industrial, in addition to 35% affordable in the number of residential units. So, I mean, we haven't raised concerns about that because it's you know, the policies are clear and it's up to the OPDC how they apply those. But yeah, I mean, this is just more about how it impacts on this borough.
I mean, again, just to follow up, the OPDC in supporting their local plan through the plan making process, obviously undertook a number of evidence-based documents that kind of gave capacity studies around what could be delivered. Those studies don't have any kind of planning weight in terms of maximum height or kind of similar to a master plan that will come forward for adjacent sites. We've got no certainty around within that other cluster of tall buildings, what scale of building, both in terms of building floor plates or extruding massing, will come forward ultimately at this stage.
Sorry, it may benefit committee through the chair. There is a local plan that was adopted for the whole OPDC area. I'm not sure if that where your question was largely trying to tease out. There is a number in there, a minimum of 19,850 homes during the plan period, which is over 10 years. That would be across the whole of the OPDC area.
Sorry, was that a minimum of 19,000? Okay. Yeah. Would you like to just repeat that again? Yeah.
I believe the opportunity area targets are 25,500 new homes and 56,000 jobs.
And are these minimums or aspirations? Targets, okay. Targets, okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Pascu-Toure. I think maybe what I understood is that you were suggesting if the heights were to be capped, then that would also cap the number of units being provided, the number of homes being provided. Was that right?
You read my thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other thoughts or questions or comments? No? No? Okay, so now we'll move on to voting. That is, we'll be voting on recommendation 1 in the report, which is on page 28, which is that the council raises an objection to the proposed development. Councillor Javot-Verdier, will you be voting for, against, or not voting?
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Souslouz.
Against.
Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Carmel.
For.
Councillor Pascu-Toure.
Against.
And I'll also be voting against. So that means recommendation 1 has been agreed. Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to item 6, Old Oak Common Station. And Yayan, if you could please introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. These final 2 items are related. First item here now is related applications. They relate to the same part of the LPDC HS2 site, and they focus around the application for a new crew building and cafeteria with related works, and then amendments to a previously approved sort of public realm in order to facilitate that. Just to give a bit more context, I mean, members will be familiar with these. These are Schedule 17 applications that come from HS2 themselves, and HS2 submit them to the OPDC for determination, and they consult us as a borough with an interest. So again, we're not in a position to make a determination, but we do feed into the OPDC's decision-making process. So in terms of the rationale behind it, we've got a picture of the location. The rationale for the need for the building is pending the completion of the rail link to Euston from this station. That said, it's not a temporary planning application. That's the rationale for it. They argue the building has been designed so it can be deconstructed when necessary, but there's no time limit on that. As members probably know, that rail link has been delayed and may continue to do so. So our concern with this is, again, the effect on our particular aspirations, and primarily here our desire to bring forward the connectivity in the area. Jalan can probably say more about than me, but the concern with this is that the location they've chosen for the building interferes with one of the elements that we were looking to bring forward. The argument in the supporting documentation is that other areas have been looked at and discounted. We're concerned that the evidence on how much they were looked into as alternatives and before they were discounted is not clear. And we're left with the proposal currently before us, which we feel has or damages our prospects for bringing forward the connectivity that we've been looking to do for some time now. Alan, do you want to just add a bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So, thanks, Jane. So just in terms of this plan shows the approved Schedule 17 application that includes along the northern edge. This is the station building here itself with the station entrance to the western side. To the north of that was envisaged a pedestrian cycle pathway to the northern extent, which runs east to west. And this land here would be then safeguarded for the provision of a future link down to the canal side, and then from the canal side back up to Scrubs Lane. What happens now, as James just said, is that in this location here, the temporary building that will come forward obviously is built up right up to that boundary. So therefore, that buffer strip that would be created for the provision of that future link would not be deliverable whilst that building is in situ.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Are there any questions for officers? Yes, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, how, with this in place, would people on Scrubs Lane access the station? Can you just clarify that?
Yep, so if I just go back to the location plan, just to show a little wider connection. So at the moment, this is the key reason why, as an authority, we've been lobbying through the local plan process and through the area development of options for the station for this link to be created, because without that link in place, the only other way to really to enter from Scrubs Lane is actually to go, north and create a loop, or through along the westway and then up into the station through Old Oak Lane. So that's why we've been lobbying quite heavily for this connection to be delivered again down to the canal side and then across from the canal up to Scrubs Lane, and then that will create a more effective route for our borough residents. I think it's also worthwhile saying in terms of that connectivity, obviously the earlier strategy was for that to be a more substantive bridge link through to where the car giant site is here. And obviously because of the removal of that site for the local plan progression, that link wouldn't be created. So the link to the canal is kind of the fallback position of what will be a secondary, hopefully the best kind of scenario that we can get in the shorter term, really.
Okay, so I suppose my comment then is that if it were to prevent access from within the borough to the Old Oak Station without an absurd loop either out of the borough or round about to get to it, it would have minimal value to people within LBHF. So I suppose that's my comment, is that without having access to the station, it creates an absurdity.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Carmel.
Thank you. I'm not as familiar with Schedule 17 applications as I am with Town and Country Planning Act, and I'm not quite sure what powers the OPDC have to determine this under a Schedule 17 application. But just as on a personal basis, this is a long build for HS2. I would have no objection to them using it during the build and commissioning of the line, because that takes a long time to come through. But if OPDC does have the power, they could then condition that as soon as the station is open to members of the public, not only does the access have to be provided, the buildings removed, but also the 775 bicycle parking provisions, which are also going to be lost by this, would also have to be provided, because we're also losing a lot of bicycle parking as well in this.
Yeah, I mean, the legal position in very short terms is the Act grants the deemed consent, and then there's a series of conditions effectively attached to that under Schedule 17 that you have to then apply for and have discharged. And that's what this is. So there are restrictions on how you can look at it, of course. This one is relatively straightforward, really. I mean, it's what we've got here is a scenario where they're saying that we need this crew building and related facilities, because this will need to act as the terminus until Euston's ready and the line is produced. Don't worry about any delay, because we can deconstruct the building and move it if needs be. that's fine. I mean, the issue is that our preferred solution in terms of connectivity, and the one that we've been lobbying to bring forward rather than delay further, can't be delivered if this is built in this location until such time as it's gone. Linked to that, therefore, is the need to understand, well, what other options were there? What else did you look at? Why has it got to be here in this sort of pinch points, if you like, where they're trying to get everything in there, and that's why they can't move it any further away, and why they can't protect that pedestrian routes. Information they've submitted in support does identify other options. It'll be up to the OPDC to sort of see whether they feel that, you know, sufficient evidence has been submitted to justify why they then regarded those as not viable. But for our purposes, you know, this is what the application is for now. So this is our opportunity, in effect, to be consistent and raise the same issues we raised before about trying to bring that connectivity forward. What effect that has on the decision-making process, ultimately, I couldn't say, but it is a live issue for this council. And as a consequence, that's why we are concerned enough to raise objection or recommend that we raise objection. It may be that some of these can be addressed. It may be that they provide further information that demonstrates that they can't find another suitable location, as opposed to this one being the preferred option because it's easier. It's unlikely that they will be able to address our concerns about being able to deliver the actual pedestrian link unless they can find somehow a way of making the building smaller and therefore moving it further away. And the second point, which was mentioned, which is the loss of the previously sort of approved cycle spaces. I'm not sure what, I mean, there's no suggestion of how that's dealt with at the moment here. I'm not sure what may or may not come forward on that. So that's why that's been added as well as a more practical sort of concern. So I guess, you know, in short, we would need to advise that we object against this because it does, on the face of it, stop us moving forward on something that we feel is very desirable, and we've been putting pressure on the OPDC and HS2 generally to bring forward as best they can. It's not very straightforward. I mean, the HS2 aren't the ones who'll be providing these links; they're all third party. But there is an obligation in the original permission that you scope them out and bring them forward. And our desire is that happens sooner rather than later. And if we are able to get that sort of traction, it would be unfortunate if we couldn't then deliver it because this building was still sitting on the site.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further comments, questions? No? Okay, so then we will move on to voting on recommendation 1, which is on page 34. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
If I may, are we taking both agenda items together, or are you going to do them separately? Okay.
Okay, so now we'll vote on recommendation 1, which is on page 34, that the council raises an objection to the proposed development. Councillor Chabot-Verdier, for, against, or not voting?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
For.
Councillor Sistous?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
I'll also be voting for. So now moving on to recommendation 2, which is also on page 34. Councillor Chabot-Verdier?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
For.
Councillor Sistous?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
And I'll also be voting for. So those recommendations have been agreed. So now we move on to item 7, which is also Old Oak Common Station. And Ian, could you please introduce the report?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've probably covered this off in the other one. This is a non-material amendment application submitted to the OPDC. And essentially, it's looking to revise a sort of landscaping public realm scheme previously approved in order to facilitate the building that we were talking about in the last item. So relatively minor stuff, but again, because they're related and because the consent that or the proposal is looking to facilitate is the one that's caused us the concern. We're raising objection on this as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments, questions? No? Okay, so we'll move on to voting. Our recommendation 1, which is on page 42. Councillor Chabot-Verdier,
4.
Councillor Harvey,
4.
Councillor Suslus,
4.
Councillor Walsh,
4.
Councillor Carmel,
4.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure.
4.
And I'll also be voting 4. And now recommendation 2, which is also on page 42. Councillor Chabot-Verdier,
4.
Councillor Harvey,
4.
Councillor Suslus,
4.
Councillor Walsh,
4.
Councillor Carmel,
4.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure.
4.
And I'll also be voting 4. So those recommendations have also been agreed. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for attending or watching, and the draft minutes of the meeting will be published on our website shortly, and they'll be formally approved at the next meeting, which is on the 17th of October, 2023. And if you have any queries or questions about the applications in the meantime, then please contact the case officer in the application report. Any comments from officers? No?
Sorry, Chair, I may have missed it, but did we agree the addendum items on those two as well?
Yes, yeah,
Okay, beg your pardon.
that's okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.